pleasure to be here. As was mentioned, I've done 3 of these now. This will be the 3rd one. My role at HCL is I'm CTO for an application security product called AppScan. So my role is not sales. It's really to understand what customers need from their application security program, and to make sure that that gets embedded into our software, or we at least provide solutions for that. So as a consequence, I spend a lot of my time looking at trends, and I look at a lot at understanding the application security marketplace. I've been doing application security since around the year 2000. Prior to that, I was a developer, so I've a lot of history in this space. But to start with, and I think it's always very important, I'm going to start with a scary slide. It's always important to put scary numbers up there. And some of this kicks on the back of that last panel discussion, which was very interesting. There's $185 billion spent on cybersecurity, but the loss in this space is something like $9.22 trillion US dollars. So that means that cybercrime is 50 times more than the spend that we have on cybersecurity. And that's a huge disparity, and it's ever increasing. So cybercrime isn't just something that will go away. The more that we put different things in place, the more we're seeing more of these things. And one of the biggest things that's really pushing this in recent times is around APIs. So APIs is a very, very growing risk. 167% in 2024 said that they had an increase in API breaches, and that's significant. APIs, some large companies have had significant breaches. So the last discussion was about breaches where it's important to acknowledge whether that's happened. So in 2023, we had an API breach that affected Twitter. We had one that affected T-Mobile. Last year, we had one that affected AT&T. And there was a really significant one which affected our Ticketmaster. So Ticketmaster was using an API that was linked to Snowflake. That API ended up exposing 560 million users' details globally. And that was all from an API, or an insecure API. So API security is a huge risk. But what I'm going to do today, because I only really have 20 minutes in front of you, is I'm going to talk through 6 trends. And then I want to sort of close it out and talk about what I see as really good security practice. So the 6 trends. And I've been monitoring trends for a very long time, and these somewhat change and somewhat don't. The first one has to be AI. And I find this one interesting because in 2016, which is a long time ago, the organization I work for, we started to use what we were calling cognitive analysis to help us do static analysis. So 2016. So what we were doing was taking a whole lot of information from doing security audits, putting that into a large data model, and then doing analysis on top of that. We also put in place analysis which looked at code coverage. So understanding where code comes into a block of where the source of code comes in, and where the source of data comes in, and where the data leaves the system. And being able to map that, we could understand different language sets. We also were able to put analytics on top of that to help identify where you could fix a finding or a vulnerability. And we called them fix groups. Now, what all that was is really what people today are calling AI. a lot of AI that's in this space, in application security, is really just large amounts of data analytics to help understand or get rid of false positives, do levels of triage, help fix findings. There's a whole lot of things that are sort of building up momentum in this space. But having said that, there is also a whole lot of things that are happening in the DevOps space, which is really helping to orchestrate a much more effective way of doing application security. Now, alongside that, which is even more alarming, is that we're also seeing a lot of the bad actors, the hackers, the people that want to exploit these things are also using AI. AI is available to everyone, or what we call AI is. And therefore, it's much easier to identify, here's a vulnerable API, maybe I can go and exploit that, maybe what organizations have that API, how can I exploit that and make some money for myself? We're seeing that there's this constant battle to stay ahead of that thing, and that's getting tighter and tighter. Now, the next 5 trends that I'm going to talk about also have AI in it, because AI isn't really a trend in its own right, it's really a technology that's helping to enhance this space. The second biggest trend, which really grew momentum out of the pandemic, or prior to the pandemic probably, is around software supply chain and software supply chain security. And that's evolved a lot. It used to be that, you know, if any of you were unfortunate enough to be around when Log4j happened, which was late in one year, nearly into over the New Year period. When Log4j went out, it was something that was exposed to nearly every organization. We had it within our product, and we also needed to help customers identify it. So we had 2 ends of that problem. Out of that, it became clear that the biggest need for organizations was, I need to know where that is, I need to know where that's effective, and I need to be able to patch that really quickly. Now, that was several years ago. That's 2019, in around that period. Since then, AI has helped to make this even more effective. We're seeing levels of blockchain being used as part of this to make the exchange of data much more secure. And we're also seeing that there's a lot more AI being used to help with the threat detection and the patching levels. So there's a level of resilience that's starting to build around software supply chain. And I think that'll improve even more. Now, this one's near and dear to me. Developer first. So this is my new buzzword, DevX 2.0. I'm not saying I came up with it, but I really like the term. Everyone would know this as being called shift left, I guess, would have been the first instance of this. And as I've said in the last 2 of these that I presented in, I dislike the term shift left immensely. And the reason I dislike it is because it's something that will never happen. I'm constantly moving left, but I'm never actually getting there. Or it's the security team dumping security onto the dev team. DevX 2.0 is really about developer first, and it's about having security in the design phase. So being able to embed security the minute that we start writing code, the minute that we do threat modeling, that we have security as part of that. So we're seeing, out of this space, we're seeing a lot of use of what we call code assistants, or very advanced coding assistants, which help the developer to be educated in security, but also to help with maybe their fixes. We're about to release a product we're calling Rapid Fix. What Rapid Fix will do is not only look at the vulnerability and give some level of explanation of it, it will actually generate the code fix and set that up into a pull request so that the developer can then look at it and make a decision whether that's something they want to put into the code. That is effective use of getting security at the very entry level. We're also seeing another emergence on what is known as policy as code. And policy as code is about moving away from having paper-based security policies and actually having that embedded into or scripted as we go through the DevOps cycle. Something that was maybe only looked at a couple of years ago is now starting to gain a lot of momentum. And I'd imagine we'll hear a lot more around policy as code in the next couple of years. So the next one is API security. So API security is I've already talked a little bit about it. And conscious of time, so I'm going to just talk about two real main aspects around API security, and I'll try and do it in a way that makes it a bit more fun. I like running. So I run, normally in Ireland, I run every day. I ran on the treadmill this morning, but I use a Garmin watch. And what the Garmin watch does for me is it tracks where I've gone and my times and all that sort of stuff. I use an API from Garmin and bring that using another API into another product called Strava. And then from Strava, I use another API and I take that into a database that I keep all my statistics on. Now, what's interesting about that is I don't use their applications. I don't really use Strava and I don't really use Garmin, but I need the data. And that's how most people these days are starting to use APIs. APIs are now the front end to applications. So even though an application might exist, don't assume that your customers are using it. They're more likely using the APIs in funky ways. Now, if Strava or Garmin decided in the morning to change one of their applications and deprecate it, or maybe put a new version of an application out, they might leave behind the old API, the one that I'm using. And maybe that API gets forgotten about. That is what is known as a shadow API. And shadow APIs are so common and so difficult for organizations to identify. Now, further to that, if maybe one of the developers there wrote an API just to help them with the infrastructure or something, and it wasn't related to the application in any shape or form, and that ended up in production, that's what's known as a zombie API. And zombie APIs are even more difficult to detect. So what most organizations are trying to do in this space is understand what APIs they have and understand where their risks are coming from. You know, a shadow API could be vulnerable to whole lots of things because it's been forgotten about. And that's where a lot of these sorts of exploits are starting to happen from. Another interesting one is platform engineering and ASPM. I'm a little miffed on this one as well because I've always been pushing a thing called continuous security, and I'll show it in a minute. And for me, continuous security was all about governance and metrics and auditing and bringing information together to allow you to have a platform to look at your risk. And that's effectively what application security posture management's about. And I first saw the term about 2 years ago, and it was at Black Hat in London, I think, which is nearly towards the end of the year in around December sort of time frame. And every second booth that I looked at had the word posture management written on it. And I couldn't get my head around why this was so common. And I started talking to a lot of the vendors to find out more information. And they were telling me that, well, a lot of them were telling me that they do some level of static analysis, some level of dashboarding, and some level of consolidation. And they're calling that posture management. And to me, that was nothing more than what I would expect from a security scanning tool. Real posture management is about the consolidation of information that comes from all aspects of your AppSec program, be it from the SIM, be it from your static analysis, your dynamic analysis, etc. And I'll show you on my continuous security slide what that really should look like. But nonetheless, I'm excited that this is a trend, and it's not one that's going away quickly. And the final one, which is a little bit more bleeding edge, is around post-quantum. And specifically around cloud and cloud security. So cloud security is another one that really took off during the pandemic. If you think about it, there is a lot of organizations who would not be on the internet but for the pandemic. So if you've ever gone into a restaurant or a bar and they've got a QR code that you scan to get the menu and then you order things, I don't believe that would have happened if we didn't have the pandemic to sort of drive that level of business. Now, out of the back end of that is that a lot of people have information that is now in the cloud, and the biggest risk for most organizations, if you ask anyone what they're really concerned about, they say it's about the data, and the data being secure. And that's where post-quantum is really coming in. So post-quantum is the blockchain, the encryption levels that come from quantum computing that we can embed and sort of secure the data and protect that. And that's starting to take some form. I'm conscious of time. So here's my slide, and it works this time, which is good. So this is going around in a loop. This is my continuous security slide, which is really talking about taking things and embedding security all the way from one end to the other. The principle here is that we have governance and we have audit. And in the middle, we have some level of metrics. And the metrics is application security posture management, effectively. But we're taking information from everywhere in this. So if we're doing IDE-based scanning, if we're doing scanning that's built out of the repository, if we're doing static analysis, if we're doing dynamic analysis, if we're doing functional testing and we're doing security as part of that, or if we're doing pen testing, or we have things going on at the SIM, all that information together will help us identify our risk. Now, I don't for the life of me understand why, and I used to be a pen tester, I don't understand why a pen tester would not look at all the information that's happened for an application before they do a pen test themselves. More often than not, they like to work in isolation. But if I was still working in pen testing, I'd love to know, what happened when we ran the static analysis on this application? What happened when we did the dynamic analysis? Because I could use that to look a little bit further into that. So the principle here is about looking at the different layers and looking at testing from one end to the other. So my final slide is really just giving some takeaways. If you are a little bit more interested, we are outside. I'd be more than happy to talk to you in more detail. We represent two products. AppScan has been around since the early 2000s. I've been with it since 2007. And it's something that does work from one end of the life cycle to the other. But the real message to take away from all of this is don't be reactive when it comes to application security. Do not be reactive. Be proactive. And the only way you can be proactive is to start to embrace some of the tools, the technologies, be that AI, be that whatever is coming, but work with that. Don't have your developers say they haven't got time for application security, because that's nonsense. Application security should start from the design phase and work all the way through.